to Minister of State. Minister Regina Doherty, please.
Thanks, Count Corla. The CSO convened the Economic Statistics Review Group in September 2016, and the report of the group is published on the 3rd of February 2017, along with the CSO's response to the report. The focus of the ESRG was to identify a suite of analyses or indicators that would provide a better understanding of the domestic components of our highly globalised economy. While GDP and GNP continue to be international standard indicators, the development of a new level indicator called GNI star has been proposed by the group to address the specific nature of the Irish economy. GNI star is designed to exclude from gross national income, or the GNI, the depreciation attributable to relocated capital assets and the impact of re-domiciled firms. In doing so, it will aim to more closely measure domestic economic activity. This should provide useful information for analytical and economic modelling purposes such as budgetary forecasting. The CSO will implement the review group's recommendations on an incremental basis and will publish annual current estimates of GNI star for the years 1995 to 2016, with the annual national income and expenditure NIE results for 2016, which are scheduled for mid-2017. The CSO plans to develop quarterly estimates of GNI star in 2018, with the estimates calculated at current and constant prices, which will be adjusted for inflation. Eurostat were international observers on the ESRG, and the ESRG report was presented and discussed at the February 2017 European Statistical System Committee meeting and the Director Generals of National Statistic Offices. It was subsequently discussed at high-level Eurostat task forces on globalisation that includes directors of the macroeconomic and business statistics. The CSO has also made presentations on the ESRG report at Eurostat working groups on national accounts, balance of payments and business statistics, and the report is helping to inform discussions on how globalisation is measured in the European statistics.
Deputy Broughan. Thanks, Can. Obviously, and thanks to the Minister for the response. Obviously, the revision of our 2015 national accounts was quite embarrassing for the CSO, I think, and for government, and the fact that the huge jump in our GDP based on the impacts of globalisation and particularly in relation to the transfer of, indeed, whole balance sheets of foreign multinationals' intellectual property assets to Ireland. It is a very unusual and awkward situation, isn't it, for the government, and indeed fairly embarrassing for the CSO that this happened in the first place. Obviously, we're a very globalised economy, and the impact of that, it's on our country. Maybe it's one of the first countries where we've seen it so dramatically. But can the Minister say that in relation to Eurostat and the other agencies that you mentioned there, that the work of the report of the Economic Statistics Review Group under Governor Lane will allay concerns maybe in our European partners that we're still not indulging in leprechaun economics, and that when we issue figures on GDP, GNP, that they can be taken, in fact, as being reasonably accurate. Could she also indicate whether or not the Euro system of accounting, the 2010 standard, and the balance of payments manual, the 6th manual standard, is being applied now to our national accounts? And just a final point, obviously, the size of our economy, and we teased out this question, I suppose, particularly at our Dáil Budgetary Committee, the fact that the size of the economy jumped by this 26% in 2015, with following then growth for 2016. This has very fundamental impacts for the fiscal rules, Ken Corla, and for the fiscal compact, and on the burden that our country has to undertake in relation to its European obligations. So is the Minister cognizant of the fact that our European partners understand this fully, and can she indicate if all the recommendations of Governor Lane's report will be implemented? Thanks, Ken.
Just on, I suppose, going back to last year in June when the 26% increase in growth was out there, I suppose there's a number of questions on from that, and the CSO gave us all the confidentiality reasons why they couldn't clarify it, or why there couldn't be a rational reason for that growth. I suppose there's two questions coming from that. One in particular, there will be a report out again this year in June for 2016. Is there any anticipation of further, I suppose, fluctuations or figures to allow, I suppose, commentary, mockery in relation to Ireland's economic growth and so forth, and just that there is a rebuttal, a sound economic rebuttal in relation to how the figures are arrived at. And the other question as well is, what was the response? I understand that the CSO and the government, put in I understand that they were able to explain the figures to the European Union. Was there any corrections made from the commentary that was made by some European institutions in relation to the figures when they were announced in June of 2016? Were there any, acknowledgements that they were wrong in the commentary they made at that particular time?
Minister.
Well, and thanks for the questions, Deputies. First of all, Deputy Broughan, with relation to the reference of leprechaun economics, I think Mr Lane was very clever insofar as when we established the ESRG that he invited 2 members of Eurostat to actually sit on that committee so that they would be party to all of the hearings, all of the documentation and all of the analytical statistics and data that actually fed into why we were creating GNI Star to differentiate from the GDP and the GNP figures. There is a rational reason for the growth. If you look at the shift in the 26% increase in 2015, it was directly because the relocations of entire balance sheets to Ireland, and with the activity related to these relocations having consequential impact on our results. To date, the figures. The scale of the relocations in 2015 was substantial. It added €300 billion worth of capital stocks to Irish balance sheets. We have the effect of the net effect of sales of those products produced abroad under the contract of those relocated headquarters, added to Ireland's trades in goods, the balance sheets of trades in goods and services in the national accounts, which doubled from €35 billion to €70 billion between 2014 and 2015. Although there was a huge jump in 2015, the relocation and repatriation of intellectual property wasn't new. It started as back as far as 2012. It is anticipated that we will have growth or a reduction in these figures year on year, which is why the Eurostat were invited to sit on that group by Chairman Lane, so as to discuss the rationale of the new analytical data that we introduced, which was GNI Star. Nobody, to answer your question, Deputy, although there were some obviously disparaging remarks made, and not just from our European counterparts, but also from some of our homegrown economic experts in this country, it certainly wasn't leprechaun economics. It certainly was a reflection of the reality of the repatriation of HQs into the country and the additional intellectual property rights that were registered here. And we'll continue to report the stats as has been done in 2015 every year thereon, with the exception obviously catching up from what we talked about earlier on from 2005 to 2015.
Thank you, Minister. Are there any supplementaries? Deputy Broughan.
I think we always had a series on net national product, and I just wondered, which takes account of depreciation, why though that accounting system didn't catch some of those massive inflows. And just to ask, I mean, if the Lane Committee's report indicates obviously that GNI Star will be produced, and that we'll have a number of other structural indicators, and obviously the quarterly publication of the gross value added, and also I think a quarterly publication of net national product. So will all of those happen, and will we be able to monitor this situation much more carefully in future? And of course, obviously with the advent of President Trump and the concerns that people have about the impact of his policies on foreign direct investment in this country, it may be less of a problem for us indeed in the future. So we look forward obviously to the publication of GNI Star. Just a final point though, does the Minister think that, our European colleagues will take that seriously, or will they simply look at GDP and GNP as being the fundamental indicator? Because none of the rest of them, I think, have had the experience of having to create this totally new series of accounting. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Broughan. Deputy Moynihan.
In June, when the disparaging commentary was being made by some of the European institutions, and was there clarifications or discussions between the state and government departments and the European institutions to clarify, I suppose, the fluctuations, and what was the response from the European institutions that did make disparaging remarks at the time?
Minister, to conclude.
Thanks, Ken Corda. Deputy Broughan, to answer your question, the GDP will continue to be the denominator for the deficit and debt ratios under the fiscal compact rules. GNI star will just be an alternative denominator for use below the line in the ratio analysis when aggregates such as deficit, debt or investments are being expressed as a percentage of the indicator of the size of the economy. And yes, it is this new analytical data, GNI star, is unique to Ireland. To answer both your questions together, I think the EU institutions just recognise that it is unique to Ireland's highly globalised market. It's not something, obviously, that they're going to follow suit on and do for their own relative markets. We will be producing the data on a quarterly basis until we catch up, but therefore, or thereafter, it will be on an annual basis. So once we complete, by mid this year, the catch-up quarterly reports from 2005-2015, then we will issue the reports on an annual basis from 2018 onwards.
Thank you very much, Minister.